OpenSea, the marketplace, the eBay of NFTs, if you will, the volume has dropped 99% since May 1st, peak of $406 million in a single day. On August 28th, volume dropped to around $5 million, down 99%, according to decentralized app tracker DApp Radar. On a monthly basis, OpenSea's volume has dropped 90%, according to Dune Analytics. The floor price of a Bored Ape has now dropped by 53%. If you remember, OpenSea raised $300 million at a $13.3 billion valuation, December 2021, in a round led by Coatue and Paradigm. To put that in perspective, that was 9 whole months ago. My, how the world has changed. Freeberg, what's your take on NFTs and this whole boondoggle?
I don't know
how will we look back on it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've had a lot of bubbles as a species. This is just another one.
I thought we were going to stop doing stock market crashing stories.
Well, this is a different market. What do you think? Did you invest in any of these NFTs?
We're in the 8th month of this story, which is fill in the blank, asset class crashed.
Yeah. This one seems... The question I have here, Sachs, is do you think that this is the end of the category, though? Do you think that's like category ending? And do you think there was ever anything interesting here? Because you heard a lot of pitches like I did for how NFTs were going to change everything. Non-fungible
You know what?
tokens.
I'll say something, because I liken this to the point, just to tie it back to what we just talked about. At the end of the day, I think I've said this in the past, but like what differentiates humans from all other species on Earth is our ability to communicate and tell stories. A story is like a narrative about something that doesn't exist. And by telling that narrative, you can create collective belief in something. And then that collective belief drives behavioral change and action in the world, right? I mean, everything from religion to government to money to art is all kind of driven. All markets are driven by this notion of narrative and collective belief that arises from that narrative. So when you go to an art dealer and you have a sit down with an art dealer, you might appreciate the art, but then the narrative begins. And the narrative is this artist did this and they came from this, and the artist that looks like this traded at 6.8 million, and this artist is only trading for 3.2 million. And the whole narrative takes you away into, okay, I should pay 3.2 million for this piece of art. And ultimately it'll be worth more. And that's the fundamental premise of markets, is you're buying into something, not necessarily always, and this is such a minority now, it's scary. Used to be that you'd own a piece of a business or a productive asset, you pull cash out of it. Hopefully you get more cash out than you put in when you buy it. Nowadays, markets allow you to trade. Therefore, the majority of market-based decisions are driven by, if I buy something for X, I'm going to be able to sell it to someone else for Y. And so the narrative is driven around, I'm paying this, someone else will pay Y down the road, I'll make money from that. And this has been repeated 1,000 times over. It's been repeated in the ICO tokens. It's been repeated in the tulip bubble. It's been repeated in every art market and subsidiary of every art market since the dawn of time, since the dawn of markets. And I think the NFTs are really just one more kind of example where this beautiful narrative is formed, the digitization of art, but it is no different than any other form of assets that we tell ourselves a story around, and we convince ourselves that I'm paying something today and someone else will pay something more for me tomorrow. And I will also say that in the last year, with the liquidity that we saw the last 2 years, it leached into the stock market, where there's supposed to be more rational behavior, that ultimately the cash flows of an asset you're buying should generate more for you than the money you're spending to buy that asset. And ultimately you can maybe trade out of it early, but still so much of it became about, well, the stock is going up, therefore if I spend X, someone else will spend Y and I'll make money on the stock, with no underlying assertion of what's the productivity of that business, what's the return on cash going to be based on the cash flows coming out of that business over time, or any of the fundamentals around it. And so much of our discussion and distortion has really been driven by this narrative fueling. And I think the NFTs are an example, but there are many others. And we're going to see many more as long as humans have the ability to communicate with each other.
You have any take on it, Jamal?
I think Freeberg's mostly right. Like, I do think that there's this thing, the Burning Man Coachella example is the best way to describe this. A lot of these things are the same, but when a few people approach something early, they're too insecure to admit that it's the same as something else. And so they spend a lot of time trying to tell you a narrative about why it's totally different. The Buffett example, would be the quote, whenever somebody tells you that this time is different, it's probably not that different. Or the other quote that's well worn in history is like, things don't necessarily repeat in history, but they rhyme. All of this is trying to say that other than like fundamental leaps of science, there's not a lot of stuff that's new in the world. We are repeating things over and over. And one of the things we repeat is the social capital that you get from having certain choices and then getting other people to validate those choices because you want to feel like you're, worthwhile. And this happened in NFTs. And I'm sure in the first phase of different movements in art, that also happened. It's probably happened in a bunch of other markets as well. So these things are more similar than they are different. Coachella and Burning Man, the same. NFTs and part of the art market, the same. Everybody that runs to you with why it's so different, I would just have a grain of salt and say, you don't need to be different. Just enjoy it because you think it's cool.